Welcome back to Deconstructing Directing with Kindness. I'm Andrew Robler, founder and archivist here, and if this is your first time here, I strongly recommend jumping back to scene 1 of this act. We are deep into the work of applying reckless kindness to the most complex moments directors face. Today, we're talking about one of the most emotionally loaded, logistically messy, and sleep-deprived parts of any production process, Tech Week. Tech Week is legendary for good reason. It's where everything comes together or completely falls apart. It's the week of late nights, broken cues, frayed nerves, and way too much caffeine. It's also often the first time you're seeing all your collaborators together in the same space, trying to make a coherent show out of hundreds of moving pieces. It's also the week when even the kindest, calmest directors are tempted to toss kindness out the window. So, let's name 4 pressure points, and then let's talk about how to meet them with specificity, kindness, and some much-needed perspective. So pressure point number 1, it's not ready yet. You walk into tech and nothing is done. Costumes are half built, lights are still being programmed, sound cues are placeholders. You feel like screaming or quitting. Often it's not quite this extreme, but even just one thing being way behind where we thought it would be can be enough to send our stress level through the roof. Here's the truth. Tech Week delays, especially in upstream spaces, are often the result of under-resourcing, not incompetence. Many designers are working unpaid or underpaid. Many props or costume folks are juggling jobs or caregiving. Sometimes they didn't have access to the space until now. Sometimes they asked for help and didn't get it. And yes, sometimes it happens because people didn't plan ahead effectively. But even then, it's almost never a malicious choice. It's not that our frustration isn't valid. It absolutely is. But reckless kindness asks us to respond to those emotions with both honesty and care. That might sound like, I know everyone is doing their best, and I also know that this is going to put a strain on our tech schedule. Let's look at what's most urgent and see how we can triage it together. We're allowed to express urgency. We're allowed to say this isn't okay. But the goal is repair, not blame. As we talked about earlier in this act, blame is an external assignment of responsibility and often paired with assumptions about motivation, and assumptions are what lead to resentment. The already stressful tech week is the last place you want blame to take root. In the past 20 years, I've been a part of at least 70 tech weeks, likely more, and trust me when I say that I've seen it all. Sometimes I've been the designer who is stretched too thin or who had tech problems pop up as soon as I got access to the space. Other times I'm the actor who got sick, and more often than not, I've been the director who has to figure out how to get the show up anyway. There are a few practices that I found can be helpful in these situations. First, triage. Sit down and figure out what are the non-negotiables, the things that must be done in order for the show to open. I'm talking the basics. If you're producing Pinocchio, for instance, the puppet working is likely non-negotiable. But maybe the fun lighting plan with the movers is proving way more challenging than we expected. We could still probably like the show without them. That doesn't mean it won't be disappointing, but it's better to be disappointed in one element than in the entire production. And triage isn't something we should do alone, but with our stage manager, members of the production team, and even perhaps our actors. I often assume that actors don't want to hear about all of the issues during Tech Week, but as a recent production reminded me, specificity is reassuring. Actors are often left sitting and waiting without knowing why. If they know what the issues are and what's being done, they can manage their stress more easily. Unknowns are a lot scarier. Second, look for pivot points. Once we know what our non-negotiables are, then it's time to think about the less crucial elements and break down why we had those elements in the show in the first place. Those moving lights would have enabled us to have a few more specials to highlight particular moments. So how else could we highlight those moments if we can't use lighting? That's a pivot point, a place where you might be able to find an alternative route to accomplishing the overall goal. And don't be afraid to delegate pivot points to your team. Brainstorming takes focus, and yours may be split while trying to manage the chaos. And third, take breaks. We need time to check in with ourselves and recenter our why, like we discussed in Act 2, so that we're not just jumping back into the chaos without understanding its purpose. Giving everyone, including yourself, space to breathe, think, and recenter may feel like a luxury you don't have time for, but it will help everything that comes after it. Nothing will fail because you took 10 minutes, I promise. All right, pressure point number 2, actor overwhelm. Tech is where some actors start to spiral. It could be that they just lost their rehearsal rhythm, they can't hear the music, their props are missing, or they've never worn the costume. Everything feels different, and now they're expected to hit every cue while adjusting to a dozen new variables. And let's not forget the fact that backstage is a very different environment to the rehearsal room. They're likely sharing a small amount of space with a lot of other people, and that can lead to conflict, which just compounds all of the other stresses of Tech Week. When they feel that stress, we are often the person that they look to for reassurance, or the one that they lash out at when things aren't working. And to be clear, designers and technicians can feel just as stressed. The difference is that we're not asking them to navigate their stress and then speak carefully memorized words and breathe life into characters. There's a pressure on actors that just doesn't exist in the same way for designers and technicians. And acknowledging that doesn't mean that we don't want to support everyone. Actors may just need more intentional support. The basic script for supporting actors is not really that different from the tools we've been using so far. If we can see that they're stressed and struggling, but they haven't asked for support, we can start by describing what we're seeing. Like, I noticed that you were a lot more short with me and the stage manager today than you usually are. I wanted to check in and see how you're doing. If they're bringing concerns to us, simply acknowledging them can be a powerful first step of empathy. That sounds like a lot. It absolutely makes sense that you'd be feeling overwhelmed with all of that going on. Thinking back to Act 2, Scene 7, we talked a lot about our nervous system and how it responds to stress or threats. While that was in the context of caring for ourselves, many of those tools can be valuable to help others navigate an activated nervous system. Since we've covered them previously, I'm not going to spend time on the details here, but if you haven't yet, definitely check out that part before you head into your next Tech Week. One of my favorite tools to help address or even get ahead of the stress is to prime my cast and crew for it before we start Tech Week. The week before we head in, I remind them that Tech Week is going to be stressful by nature of how it works. This is especially true for us as a company without a permanent venue. I remind them to start getting as much sleep as possible in the week leading up to Tech, along with hydration and nutrition. I remind them to pack snacks and bring water. I also am more likely to cut rehearsals or cut rehearsals short during the week before Tech as a way of showing them that I'm serious about them getting more rest. If I can tell that they're dragging the week before Tech, I know that the adrenaline is only going to get them so far. Once we get to Tech Week, I try to focus on building a sense of ritual. Group warm-ups, group cool-down, a check-in at the top of every night, ending every rehearsal with affirmations or reflections. Actors spend so much time trying to get it right. They need and want, even if they won't admit it, positive feedback, especially during Tech. That doesn't mean that you have to lie to them when something isn't working or they're missing the mark, but there's a big difference between, okay, this is the third time I've given you that note, you need to look at your script again, and, hey, I know you've been working on this, and it makes sense that all the new elements are throwing you. I know that you can do it, though. Are you game to run it again so that you can nail it? These small rituals create collective stability, and stability frees actors to focus more fully on their work. All right, pressure point number 3, conflict under stress. Tech Week is a crucible for collaboration breakdowns. Maybe a designer snaps at the assistant stage manager. Maybe an actor storms out after a missed cue. Maybe you lose your cool with the stage manager in front of the whole team. As we talked about earlier in this act, conflict is not failure. Conflict is inevitable. It's how we handle it that matters. Reckless kindness doesn't mean pretending that everything is fine. That's not very kind to ourselves. Sometimes we need to express our frustration or acknowledge that we are frustrated and need time to calm down, and the same thing goes for our collaborators. Remember that the goal, while conflict is happening, is to avoid assuming motive wherever possible. Focus on behavior. Some useful phrases include, let's take 5 and regroup. Hey, I need to step away and cool off before we talk about this. I know tensions are high. Let's reset and figure out what we need to move forward. We will screw up, of course. We will raise our voice or blame someone unfairly or have an emotional breakdown in front of people. I've done that. When we imagine the role of a director as a dictator, apologizing seems like weakness, because if you can mess up, then what right do you have to be in charge? But when we see ourselves as co-creators and collaborators, it makes sense we mess up sometimes, and it would be unkind to not acknowledge the hurt our mistake made. And while we can only ever control what we do, we can put things in place to help everyone approach conflict more effectively. Who does what documents from Act 1, Scene 2 are one example, but you can also agree on a process for handling conflict as a team. The Association of Mental Health Coordinators refers to this as a concern navigation pathway, and you can find a link to their site to learn more about that below. Tell Bridget that Andrew sent you. Putting time into a tool like this by reviewing it and ensuring that everyone bought into it as a part of your process goes a long way to helping your team feel like you have their back. Another hard-won lesson: saying it once isn't enough. Theater folks have heard it all before, but that didn't mean it was backed up by actions that supported it, so they may not trust your words. Some have nearly crippling anxiety about making the wrong choice because of prior hurt. We have to say it, and we have to mean it, and we have to do it. And we have to keep reminding them that they are our co-creators and that you are serious about creating a space where they can be brave. Pressure point number 4. This isn't my show anymore. One of the most subtle emotional shifts for directors during tech is the beginning of our sense of loss. Suddenly, we're not the focus of the room anymore. The SM is calling the show, the designers are making final adjustments, the actors are consulting their fight or dance captain to review spacing. It can start to feel like we're not really directing anymore. The common saying about directing is that our job ends when performances start. So it makes sense that our role would need to lessen as we hand over more of the responsibilities to the folks that will see it through. Even if we're wearing other hats in addition to directing, that role has to start receding. This is healthy, but it can feel disorienting. And that disorientation can lead to behaviors we don't always recognize. We may catch ourselves nitpicking tiny things, getting irritable when someone doesn't check in with us first, or feeling like we need to just toss out the blocking for that one scene and start again from scratch. These are normal behaviors because we are in fact giving up control. And as we talked about in Scene 3, having less control is scary. It's normal for our bodies and minds to perceive that as a threat because that's what it's been programmed to do. We have to take the time to teach it that giving up that control is not the same as a bear chasing us. We can handle this. So, if you feel this way, you're not alone and you're not failing. You're human. This whole act is about directing with kindness, and sometimes looking for opportunities to be kind is the best way to handle fear and doubt. If you start to notice these behaviors in yourself, take a moment and ask yourself what the team needs from you right now, where you could offer specificity, kindness, or perspective, or where you can delegate to create more breathing room for yourself. But the most important question of all is this: can I trust the people I've invited into this process to do their jobs, even if they do them differently than I would? Directing is deeply personal. In some ways, I think even more so than acting. Not nearly as vulnerable, but as directors, we spend a time with a project longer than just about anyone else. We dream about it, think about it in the car and in the shower, and even in our dreams for months or in some cases years. And if you don't do that, I don't think you're doing anything wrong. That's probably healthier. Of course, it's going to be hard to let go, especially because the reality almost never ever lives up exactly to what was or is in our mind. This is the final phase of directing that nobody ever talks about: letting go with intention. I hope this scene didn't feel like too much of a downer. Let's be honest, Tech Week sometimes brings out the worst in us, but it can also bring out the best. It's where we see designers advocating for actors' safety, crew members inventing last-minute miracles, actors supporting each other through panic attacks, where people bring snacks, hold space, and somehow, the show will open. It may not be perfect, but it will belong to all of you. And what your collaborators will remember is not how perfectly the cue lights synced up with the downbeat. They'll remember how they were treated when things got hard. That's why reckless kindness isn't a weakness. It's the whole point. And as always, all of this is free. If you'd like to help keep it free for others, consider joining our Patreon. Every dollar helps me keep supporting directors, especially those in upstream spaces who are doing this work with courage, creativity, and yes, kindness. I'll see you in our final scene of this act, scene 8, where we'll talk about the unique challenges of directing emotionally charged material. Until then, take a breath, drink water, and stay recklessly kind.